law enforcement officials and with the other public safety officers that exist. I am running to improve our city's services by creating coalitions of smaller, like-minded experiences within our community to be able to uplift those voices that have for so long gone unheard. And I really appreciate the time I'm spending with you here tonight.
And next up, we have Ms. Inez Bordeaux. Hi, I want to first start by thanking you all for the invitation to be here tonight and by taking all of you. I know it's nice outside. We would probably much rather be outside, walking, talking, chilling somewhere, and instead you chose to spend your time with us this evening. My name is Inez Bordeaux. Bordeaux, it rhymes with Shoto, so if you can say Shoto, you can say Bordeaux. I use she, her pronouns. I am a mother of 4. I am from St. Louis and for St. Louis. I am a nurse. I've been a nurse for 18 years, and I've also spent the last 10 years as a community organizer at a local nonprofit civil rights law firm, Arch City Defenders, as the Deputy Director of Community Collaborations. I also have the honor of serving as the committee woman for the 3rd Ward and the state committee woman for Senate District 5. I'm standing in front of you today running to be your 3rd Ward alderperson because I think, like Dallas, after 16 years, it is time for new leadership in this ward. I've lived in this ward for 10 years, and I've watched the way the ward has changed and the way that it hasn't. And I believe that we need new leadership with new perspective. I've been through a lot in my life. I've been unhoused. I know what it feels like to be evicted. I know what it feels like to have my utilities turned off. I know what it feels like to have your criminal background and be unable to get a job. And I believe that we deserve better. You deserve better. Our neighbors deserve better. Our community deserves better than the leadership that we've been getting. Over the last 10 years, I've been a fearless advocate for the people of St. Louis when it comes to re-envisioning public safety. I led the campaign to close the hellhole jail known as the Workhouse. I've led the coalition of 50+ St. Louis area organizations that do social justice work, and I want to fight for you. Of course, last but not least, our current Alderman, Shane Gone.
Hi, thank you everyone for being here tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to be before our neighbors. And thank you to DSCC for organizing the event and to St. Anthony's Parish Hall for hosting us this evening. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here before you all. I have been a resident of the neighborhood for over 20 years now. I stepped into leadership when I first moved into the neighborhood. I got onto the board of DSCC. I served there for a number of years before running for alderperson. I helped to revitalize our neighborhood business district and the association with it. I brought resources actually to the neighborhood for the purpose of economic development, for youth, and for other economic development activities and development of affordable housing. When I first got elected, we had 2 major vacancies in the ward. One was the old National Candy Company building that's over at Gravelway and Merrimack, and the other one was Cleveland High School. We're still working on Cleveland High School, and I'm committed to making that work for all of us here. And we've had a number of opportunities to get neighbors together and engaged in that process. But I continue to work for our young people in this community. I brought Jean Slade Boys and Girls Club into our neighborhood. That was not a small feat. When I first got here, we did not have any youth services available to the young people in our community. 30% of the population in this ward is underneath the age of 18. Having those resources available to our young people is really critical for their future success. I am working for them. I am here working and advocating for public safety. I have worked on violence intervention programs. I helped to get funding for Cure Violence, which eventually morphed into Show Me Peace. I helped initiate programs like the neighborhood ownership model. And, in terms of safety of our streets, I was the first alderman to pass a complete streets policy. I've been the first alderperson to pass marijuana reform. I've been the first alderperson to fight for LGBTQ rights in the city of St. Louis. I ran on progressive values. I stand on those progressive values, and I look forward to continuing that conversation tonight.
Start off with Ms. Dallas Adams. What do you see as the role of the alderman?
Yeah, So I believe the role of the alderperson is multifaceted. I think first and foremost, they are our ward's most vocal champion, working at City Hall to make sure that we can bring resources to fill the gaps that we have here in our area. I think that they are the perfect person to do that because they actually live in our ward and should be as active and present as possible to listen to as many people as possible and create and converge a plan to move us forward. But ultimately, an alderperson is one of 14 legislators that are charged with creating laws and policies that move their ward and the entire city of St. Louis forward. And so as the alderperson, I look forward to being able to take a proactive stance with the things that I know about our neighbors, the things I know about our neighborhoods, to be able to implement policies that not only drive the third ward forward, but help to stop the city of St. Louis from continuing to shrink and lose residents for some of our more problematic issues that we know that we face here and we face across the entire city of St. Louis.
And I'm Inez Bordeaux, same question. Yes, I see the role of an alderperson as your first line of defense when it comes to concerns, problems that are happening in the ward. Your alderperson should be a person that is dependable and reliable, and when you reach out to them for assistance, they can point you in the right directions toward the appropriate resources, services, city services, other departments, etc. I also see the role of the Board of Aldermen or a alderman as an important oversight mechanism for city government. When we're having issues around getting potholes filled with the streets department, when there are issues around policing and jails, I see the role as an alderperson as a way of the people of the ward being able to get the answers that they need from city government, in addition to being able to provide that oversight to get the concerns, the issues addressed. I'm an organizer, so I can project. To get your issues and concerns addressed and changes made at the city level, in addition to being the people that help provide or make sure efficient city services are available to all of St. Louis, not just people who can afford to pay a special taxing district. Thank you. And Shane.
Thank you. This is actually one of my favorite questions to talk with people while I'm at the doors. The role of an alderperson is multifaceted, but the three primary pieces of the role. One, we are the legislative branch of city government. So we set policies for the city of St. Louis, whether that's creating laws, amending laws, or getting rid of them altogether. And so, that's a really critical component. And that's where my experience matters most. I've been down there for 16 years now. I got elected to a leadership role by my colleagues. I built the trust of the other members of the board. I'm the first openly LGBTQ member of leadership in city government as the vice president of the Board of Aldermen. And the other pieces of the aldermanic role that are important for folks to know, we do act as a conduit between city residents and city services. City services fail very regularly. And so it's really, something that I deal with every single day, taking calls, emails, text messages, Facebook messages, etc., from neighbors who are having a difficult time, whether that's trash services being picked up, whether that's the vacant building needing to be boarded up, whether that's crime or speeding, things of that nature. I take those calls every single day from our neighbors. The other thing that we do as older people is we act as an ambassador for the wards that we represent. And I do that every single day for this community. And as I mentioned, bringing resources into our neighborhood, whether that's Jean Slade Boys and Girls Club, whether that's putting together community partnerships like the St. Joseph's Housing Initiative, which happened because of conversations I initiated with St. Mary's High School and the Incarnate Word Foundation. Out of those conversations came the St. Joseph's Housing Initiative, which now has 12 different projects for affordable housing happening right here in the third ward. So I'm happy to be here again, having these conversations with you, and look forward to continuing them the rest of the evening.
Okay, back to you, Ms. Dallas Adams. Why is there disparity between neighborhoods in the third ward, and what are your plans to overcome such disparity?
It's a great question. Thank you to whoever asked that. I think one of the primary reasons why we see disparities within the ward, and I think we can see that in the trends that we've seen in our electoral process, is that there are people who are not being listened to or prioritized. I spoke earlier about our ward boundaries expanding. And I know that there are many people who will rest on the fact that these parts of the ward that are vacant or that are dilapidated or lacking resources were not their responsibility 2 years ago. But the thing that I know about leadership is that you have to be proactive, and you have to plan. When you inherit new neighbors, you go and you meet them. When you inherit a new area, you take stock and you look and you take a pause and you plan for how you can leverage the resources that might exist and all of the resources around here to be able to invest in them. What I see, even walking in the traditional 25th district, the 25th ward, which is, something that has been under the same leadership for almost 2 decades. I see the gaps that exist to be in favor of developing in areas that take advantage of tax districts, that take advantage of special business districts. And we can see that inequity spreads throughout the entire ward. And I think that the disparity first becomes solved by listening. Everybody has priorities. Everybody has passions. Everybody has things that they'd rather prioritize. But a true leader is able to put those needs aside to be able to listen to their constituents, to be able to listen to the people that they're willing to lead and make a plan to solve for that in their planning process. Thank you.
And I same question.
Repeat the question.
Yes, it is. Why is there disparity between neighborhoods in the third ward, and what are your plans to overcome such disparity?
Seen it with the way ARPA money was divided up, how although we have a majority Black and brown community, we received very little of the actual ARPA money to go towards investments in our communities and neighborhoods. So I think part of the reason why we see that disparity is because there's been a lot of focus on economic development and growing small businesses, and not enough focus on helping the people who live in our communities that can contribute to the economic investments in our neighborhoods. So we're talking about Black people, we're talking about brown people, we're talking about poor people and unhoused people. Those things have not been focused on, and it is very clear to see over the last at least 10 years where efforts have been made to invest in certain parts of the ward and not other parts in the ward, to give attention to certain people and not other people. And when I'm elected Alderwoman of the 3rd Ward, that will change.
Can we get a follow-up question on which area you're on?
I mean, I'll take that. If you want to follow up.
Do you want to
On
give
what
that
areas
a follow
we
up
can-
for next?
Yeah, if you're available, follow up on what areas those are.
The areas that have been invested in, we can see it on Merrimack, we can see it on Virginia, but if you drive down California, it looks like there hasn't been an elected official that has driven that block in years and years and years. There are more vacant buildings on California than there are little homes. You can see with the trash and the tires in vacant yards, you can see it with the buildings falling apart. So I think if you live around the Merrimack, Virginia area, you are benefiting from the recent and not so recent investment into those businesses. But it is very clear that Black blocks where there are majority Black and brown people have been neglected, and poverty is a policy choice that is being made at the Board of Aldermen every single day by not investing in creating or making sure people's material needs have been invested in. So safe, affordable housing, regular city services, drug treatment, and mental health services.
Thank you, Inez. And Shane.
Look, I'm going to be honest, listening to my opponents, with the neighborhood's gentrifying and others saying that the neighborhood is falling apart at the seams. What I can tell you is that I work with people across the entire ward. California is a snow route. I had to remind the streets department that it was a snow route. Why? Because I went around the entire ward during those snowstorms to make sure that all of the streets in this ward were being treated equally. I make sure that if there are streets that don't have lights on, that we get those lights on. I don't care if they're in Dutchtown, Carondelet, Graveway Park, what part of the ward they're in. Also, some of the newest parts of the 3rd Ward, I've been actively working to get neighborhood groups up and running again. This past Tuesday, last night, I was just with a group of 10 neighbors who are working to form a neighborhood association in Northeast Dutchtown. That used to be part of the 20th Ward, which is now the 3rd Ward. I am doing that work each and every day to make sure that we are treating the neighborhoods in this area equitably and fairly. I am making sure that we do affordable housing everywhere. Talk about California, St. Louis Art Place. It's a program that provides affordable housing to low and moderate income artists. They're doing that work on the 3,700 blocks in Graveway Park. They're doing that work in the 4,000 blocks in Dutchtown. We are making sure that that affordable housing is being, developed all over the neighborhood, not just in Northeast Dutchtown, not just on Virginia, not just down in Carondelet, but everywhere across the ward. I have been doing that work since day one and look forward to continuing it with your support going forward.
Thank you, Shane. We're going to come back to Dallas. Next question is, do you speak a language other than English? If so, how will you be responsive to our multilingual community?
Great question. I do not speak a language fluently other than English. And I think that, in a widely evolving landscape like the city of St. Louis, especially in the 3rd Ward, where we are home to many people who speak multiple languages, it's important to be able to have those resources and to be able to fill in the gaps. A good leader is able to look at their gaps and be able to fill them. And so one of the gaps that I noticed in this campaign journey is the fact that we have a large number of people who speak Bosnian. We have a large number of people who we've been talking to who speak Spanish. And so what I did to fill in that gap just here in this role as running to be your alderwoman, I found team members who could be able to do that. I leveraged technology to be able to communicate across those language barriers with some sort of fluency using the technology that we have here in our hands. The beautiful part about bridging a language barrier is that energy is always felt. Energy is always felt. When you go and you have a conversation with someone, you can always feel how somebody is receiving you, what it is that is landing with them, what's resonating, the things that they care about and that are most important to them. And I'm proud of the way that we've been able to leverage this here. And if elected as your alderwoman, I look forward to bringing in additional resources, additional translation resources that I know are available for much more cost than I have available in my campaign account to be able to serve, and also led efforts in my previous role at Great Rivers Greenway as we were redesigning the website to really think about how we could reach all people in the St. Louis region, knowing that we are home to a growing number of population of new Americans who may not speak English. Thank you.
And Inez.
Repeat the question.
Yes, absolutely. Do you speak any languages other than English? If so, how will you be responsive to our multilingual community?
Okay, I am fluent in English and I have been learning ASL. Admittedly, I know the alphabet and I know a whole bunch of curse words and insults, but I'm getting there. But outside of English, I do not speak another language. I think this question and the answer to it is a very simple way for us to be more inclusive. All of our resources, city websites, anything that comes in contact with the public, I think should be interpreted into as many languages as possible. I frequently see at some press conferences that the city has that they are like ASL interpreters and other interpreters available for the community so that they can find out and know exactly what's going on and where they need to go to get that assistance. And so I would, as Alderwoman, continue that practice and continue to fight for us to be as inclusive as possible, not just with ASL, but other languages, especially since the 3rd Ward has some of the fastest growing immigrant population in the city. And I want to continue to see our neighborhood grow. And so in order for that to happen, we do have to make sure that all of the resources, all of the data, all of the information that we're putting out is available in as many languages as possible. And I think this is something easy and common sense that we can do.
Thank you. Guten Tag, ich bin Shane. Ni hao, Woshishane. I have had the privilege of learning multiple languages. I studied Latin for close to 8 years. I studied German for over 4 years. I studied Chinese at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California. Now, I have not been able to utilize those skills for a very long time. St. Louis is not necessarily the most multi-ethnic, multicultural society in that respect. But one of the things that I am most proud of and that I talk to people about all the time is how diverse this ward is, and that we are the home to the largest immigrant community in the entire St. Louis region. And I have fought to make sure that our city represents those values, including working with the current administration on setting up the Office of New Americans. And I've been working with them to make sure that our park signage reflects the languages that are present in our community as well. And so that's one initiative that I've been working on more recently, and is hoping to have that done by this coming summer. Thank you.
Okay, and Ms. Dallas Adams, next question. Can you provide your strategy for how you would deal with vacancies and nuisance properties, as well as developments that you would like to see along Chippewa over the next few years?
Yeah, great question. So I think that we already have a lot of great tools working in our favor. I see some neighbors in here who are working diligently on a vacancy strategy. And so here's what I'll tell you about vacancy, the things that I know and the things that maybe most of us here don't really understand that well. Vacancy is defined as an unowned, unoccupied property. A lot of what we are dealing with in our blighted areas are actually owned properties. They are owned, abandoned, negligent properties, sometimes owned by people who live in the city, sometimes people who don't even live in the state. And so being able to move those properties out of the hands of negligent and absent property owners and into the hands of good faith developers or rehabbers or homeowners is a long, arduous process that involves litigation. So firstly and foremostly, we have to be able to take full landscape and a full stock of these things. And I see Mr. Lindsay poking his head out. He is the vacancy litigation specialist here in the Dutchtown area. And I think that the work that they have been able to do right now has been noble. I'm actually, a beneficiary of one of the programs that Mr. Cohn talked about earlier, Alderman Cohn, excuse me. St. Joseph Housing Initiative, which is a beautiful nonprofit agency that takes LRA properties, sold properties, reclaimed properties, and puts them into the hands of first-time homeowners that are able to stay in place and anchor neighborhoods and anchor blocks. And so part of my vacancy strategy is to continue to empower those nonprofit organizations. Now, as I'm talking to these nonprofit developers, one of the biggest barriers they face is how many processes they have to go in city government to be able to take advantage of these properties and to develop them. So one of the things I'd like to look at is legislation that helps to make it easier for good faith and nonprofit developers to be able to create more opportunities like St. Joseph Housing Initiative is doing. Along the Chippewa corridor specifically, I think that there are many needs that our community is facing right now. Chippewa borders right up to that Broadway border of the 3rd and the 8th ward right now, and we are lacking access to fresh food, access to pharmacy, access to the basic necessities that we need for our walkable neighbors. And being along a busy transit corridor, I think it is worth prioritizing those immediate essentials for our neighbors.
Thank you, Dallas. Same question. Can you provide your strategy for how you would deal with vacancies and nuisance properties, as well as developments you would like to see along the Chippewa corridor?
Okay, I'm going to ask you again for that second part of the question in a second. All right, so one, I think we need a functioning building inspection department. Right now, it seems to be kind of rife with corruption. So first, I would like to do a full assessment of all of the vacant properties in St. Louis or in our ward. We need to do it in all of St. Louis, but we can start in the 3rd ward to see what properties are viable, what can be saved, and what cannot. And the things that cannot be saved, let's go ahead and tear those down, taking into account of the environmental factors that come with destroying buildings that are sometimes 100, 150 years old, filled with asbestos and lead, and in other environmental concerns. Then I would like to see legislation that reduces the amount of property that out-of-town conglomerations and corporations are able to purchase. I want to limit the amount of folks that do not live in St. Louis that are coming here, buying properties, and then just sitting on them and leaving them vacant, leaving them to fall to disrepair. And then as far as businesses that I'd like to see on Chippewa, I think the community knows exactly what the community needs. So just off of the top of my head, we need more places for people to buy fresh, healthy food. We need more places for kids to go and congregate, because every summer, what do we always complain about? Not me, maybe y'all, but we always complain that there are children running around who are getting into trouble, who don't have anything to do. So we need more places for our children to go in our communities, in addition to more grocery stores and more small businesses. I want to see more barbershops, more laundromats, more corner store / bodegas. I want to see more community centers and places for people to congregate.
Thank you, Inez. And Alderman Cone.
So the question was about how we're going to handle vacancy, nuisances, and then specifically about development along Chippewa.
Yep, you got it.
So first of all, I'd like to point out that we have actually already done a vacant building survey in the city of St. Louis. After firefighter Paulson died, the city of St. Louis actually had the fire department and building division go out and conduct that study citywide. So we are already aware of what buildings are vacant in the city of St. Louis. We have a very finite number of resources to address vacancy. One of them is definitely through demolition, which I have fought for demolition resources in our ward, and I am probably one of the more successful older persons on the south side trying to get those resources for our community. But also we started through ARPA funding a building stabilization fund as well. And so there's been some issues with that. The administration has to deal with those, but we've had success with that in our ward specifically, and in the area just south of Chippewa. We've had a number of those properties stabilized through that program as well. Chippewa is a beautiful commercial corridor. The Lutheran Development Group has been doing a wonderful job at rehabbing the properties and creating affordable housing opportunities along that stretch of Chippewa. And they've been doing a lot of work with respect to the areas around it. And as I mentioned earlier, the St. Louis Art Place Initiative has also been creating a vision and a plan and putting that in place in that geography as well. We have a huge problem nationally with retail establishments closing. I think all of us have seen Walgreens is closing their stores. It's not just along South Broadway. That is nationwide. You know, we have to get more people down here. We need to expand the Metro link. So whether that's, a BRT route or the light rail, getting that expanded further south along Jefferson to Broadway is really critical. Creating jobs, reopening the hospital that's over at Broadway and Osage is really important. I actually just got word that they got their CON, which is I'm getting a message to stop, so I'll stop. But we've got a lot of wonderful projects that are happening along that corridor too, and I look forward to working with our partners on that.
Thank you very much. Back to Dallas. Is there a plan in place to clean up our neighborhood's graffiti and trash that does not involve tax-paying residents to volunteer their time, considering some residents are working multiple jobs?
Yeah, great question. As a person who was volunteering their time after working full time, and sometimes even competing priorities between my job and my volunteer work, I feel this very deeply. A lot of the times we don't have enough resources to go around, so we do have to pitch in as community members to make sure that we are creating an environment that we feel proud of and that our neighbors feel proud of too. Being able to carry that slack as neighbors sometimes is very burdensome. This is not a question that I have carefully considered, and Katrina, I'd like to ask for those specific instances again of what we plan to solve for.
Specifically, graffiti and trash.
Yeah, graffiti and trash. I think trash, one of those things that we can think about in terms of our city services and how often they fail. Our trash department is critically under-resourced. They are understaffed. They are working with equipment that is dangerously old and very dangerous to operate at the rate that they're operating it with. And
while I do not have a plan in place for graffiti, I look forward to being able to take that back and really think about what an alderperson can be able to do to converge those resources. But when we think about our city departments, especially when we think about our refuse, because everybody's always upset about trash, we need to think about the holes and the reasons why we keep hemorrhaging city workers from our departments. They are underpaid, they are under benefited, and as the alderperson, while I will not be able to make those budgetary inputs, I can say that I want to fight for our city workers to be able to give those city workers the benefits and the pay that they truly deserve to be able to serve our 62 square miles. And, while I do not advocate for anybody to break their backs in volunteerism, I think that it's important for us as community members to have that stake in our community, to be able to show and lead by example and bring people along that our neighborhood is worth investing in. And so if everybody does a little, nobody has to do a lot. And that's one of the things that I look forward to being able to bring as a community leader to the table. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I actually have a plan for this. I believe, there are at least 1,000 city open jobs right now. Several hundred of those are in the refuge and trash department. And so we have a serious lack of city services because we are incredibly lacking in city employees. I happen to know a couple of places where people who are desperate for jobs and just need simply a hand to get those jobs. I think we should have a satellite office, St. Louis City Personnel Department, satellite office inside of every Department of Probation and Parole. As a person who's had something on my criminal background and understand how difficult it is to get a job, I think it would be game changing for the people of the city and people impacted by the criminal legal system if those folks can be filtered right into those city jobs that pay at least $15 an hour, come with health insurance, pensions, and other benefits. And that is a win-win for the people of St. Louis. We get our trash picked up, we get the graffiti cleaned up, but we also reduce crime and reduce recidivism by making sure vulnerable and at-risk people have the things that they need in order to meet their material needs, like a good paying job.
Trash and graffiti are two issues that I get calls about fairly regularly, believe it or not. Trash is a multifaceted issue. One, our dumpster system is outdated. It's been around for decades. And the city of St. Louis, fun fact, has a trash system that's specifically designed for the city of St. Louis. So when we have issues in our refuse department, we can't just contract out with a third party or reach out to a University City or Richmond Heights to have them come in and help us with our services. And even if U City or Richmond Heights has a similar system, they don't have the capacity to take on 1,000 miles worth of alleys that have dumpsters in them. And so we have to get smart about how we modernize our trash system, our refuse system. And part of that, we do have new trucks. I fought actually getting these new trucks partly because we need to get new equipment across the board to modernize our system. One of the things that the Jones administration and myself have been working on the last few months is putting together a study and a pilot program with respect to refuse. Graffiti in particular is another issue. We see it fairly regularly. If it's on city property, the city can go in and remove it pretty quickly, but oftentimes it's on private property. If it's on private property, we have to have owner permission to access that building or the property to remove the graffiti. We do have a program that's operated through Operation Brightside that does graffiti removal. You need to call and report it. Call Citizen Service Bureau and report it. If you're not reporting it, the city doesn't have graffiti managers roaming around identifying where the graffiti is. So if people aren't calling it in, they don't know. And so it's really important for that community engagement piece to be able to make those reports so that the city can follow through on it. And they do a relatively good job. Wintertime is a little difficult because you can't spray water on buildings in the wintertime, it freezes. So it's a little bit more difficult to do graffiti removal in winter, but they still get out there on the warm days to take care of it when it's reported.
Thank you. Okay, and back to Miss Adams. Okay, At a time when billionaires are doing all they can to take our country, St. Louis is also being sacrificed for the interests of wealthy developers and corporations, i.e. Israeli Chemicals Ltd., Boeing, etc. What will you do as an alder to say no to tax incentives and land grabs for these corporate interests that are complicit in human rights abuses, damage our water and environment, and keep resources from our public schools?
Okay, I think the question I hear about is tax incentives layered in all of that. Tax incentives? Okay, great. The city of St. Louis has dramatically decreased the use of tax incentives, and I fully support decreasing the use of tax incentives in order to prioritize businesses over people. I think every time I was actually having a conversation with a neighbor today in the Carondelet neighborhood, and his perspective, and a lot of people's perspective, that in order for us to grow our city, we have to be able to attract businesses. And there are a few things that stand in the way of that. His argument was that the income tax and having to pay additional workers and workers who may not exist in this area and having to attract development gets in our way. But he also argued for the use of TIFs. And I had to educate him that anytime you put a tax incentive in place to be able to attract a business, that tax burden goes back onto the city of St. Louis taxpayers. Last year, we received a fiscal health grade of a D from an accounting resource that grades the 50 top cities in the entire country. And we received that grade because of the $11,000 tax burden that each one of us was shouldering. When we look at the Board of Aldermen and we look at the role of an alderperson in this sea of 14, everybody's ward has competing priorities. There are some wards that are built up and sustaining themselves on TIFs and being able to extract all of that tax money for their specific interests in their projects that are hurting the rest of us across the city of St. Louis. And I think that we can be more imaginative about how we anchor businesses. We can be more imaginative about how we attract development and anchor people in our city that doesn't rely on tax incentives.
I have long been on the record being anti-TIF and tax abatements because it reduces our tax base. We have big needs in St. Louis, and all of those needs cost money. And if we're giving away all of our tax dollars to big corporations who come in and don't pay taxes, like Barnes, like Wash U, like SLU, and other companies that have come in, like, we are getting what we pay for, and what we are paying for is nothing. So what we are getting is nothing. So I'm in support of minimizing the amount of TIFs and tax abatements that we do in the city. I'm sorry, give me the rest of the question also.
What will you do as an alder to say no to tax incentives and land grabs for these corporate interests that are complicit in human rights abuses, damaging our water and environment, and keeping resources from our public schools?
Yes, and I am 1000% opposed to any corporation or company that is doing damage to the environment, that is making weapons that are being used in genocides and other places in the world. I am against giving any of those companies TIFs and tax abatements. This is not just a fiscal issue, but it's also a moral issue. And I don't want to see St. Louis City continue to be complicit in these types of activities.
I guess I should thank my opponents for pointing out that I've done the work to make sure that we're reducing our reliance on tax incentives in the city of St. Louis. When I was chair of the Neighborhood Development Committee, which was the committee at the time that had hearings on tax abatements, I shut it down. And we did not hear tax abatement until we were able to fund our planning department. The city of St. Louis's planning department is woefully and inadequately staffed as well. And I would not allow any more abatements through my committee until we hired more staff in that department to get a better understanding of where we are. I also sponsored legislation creating incentive reform for the city of St. Louis as well. So now we have community partners at the table, including SLPS, who has the option to weigh in on tax abatements and tax incentives when it comes before the Board of Aldermen. I passed that legislation in partnership with my colleagues in President Green's office down at the Board of Aldermen. I continue to advocate for measures that protect our quality of life, our environment, and work against the corporate interests that were posed in that question. When WashU talked about buying part of Forest Park, I worked with community organizations to stop that from happening and partnered with legislators at the time, because I was not elected at the time. I was in the community working to make sure that we passed a charter amendment that allowed for a vote of the people whenever our parkland specifically goes out. When there was a development on the North River front that was going to endanger wildlife on our river, I was there at the table having conversations, talking about light pollution, talking about the pollution in general from boating and things, that they wanted to build a marina up there just north of the chain of rocks. I worked with Sierra Club and other community partners to make sure that those voices were represented at the table when we had those discussions. And I'll continue to do that as your alderperson if you choose to elect me again.
Okay, and back to Miss Dallas Adams. Why should police budgets continue to expand when we only spend $1 for every dollar on human and social services? What do you think of the state takeover of the police department?
It's not even
1
1
cent.
cent anymore.
Sorry, it was my question.
It's okay.
Can you repeat the first part of the question for me?
Why should police budgets continue to expand when we only spend 1 cent for every dollar on human social services?
Okay, thank you very much. I've never advocated for our police budget to expand. No, I did not. No, I did not. No, I did not. No, I did
Well,
not.
let's all just agree to let the moderator moderate.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, let's carry on.
Thank you very
moderator.
much.
Thank you.
Okay. What I do know is that we need all of our tools to be able to work together. I think public safety is something that we tend to have very narrow focuses on. We tend to think of public safety as just police or no police and nothing else. We need to be able to support people, but we need to be able to support people in a way that makes them feel safe enough to stay in place. The city of St. Louis is hemorrhaging residents for multiple reasons, but public safety seems to be the number one thing that keeps coming up on people's minds. People do not want to live in an area where they are rife with gun violence, where there's traffic violence abound, where there are no resources in place to protect the citizens of St. Louis. I don't believe inherently that police are the only people who have the ability to do that. And so I would never advocate for adding more money to the police budget. I would never advocate for
Roll the tape. You're a liar.
no, thank you, Maxie. Thank you, Maxie.
We're just gonna keep this going. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna
What
keep
is the
it going.
second part of this question?
Yes. What do you think of the state takeover of the police department?
I do not believe that the state of Missouri has any role at the table when it comes to our city's police department. I think that there is no question that the city of St. Louis is under attack from the state legislature at so many different levels. We are the problem child of the state, and they will do everything that they can to be able to intervene in the way that we live our lives as St. Louisans. And I don't believe that anybody who is too afraid to come to the city of St. Louis and to spend time in the city of St. Louis should be someone who should be making decisions for us about our public safety.
Okay, so why should police budgets continue to expand when we only spend 1 cent for every dollar on human social services? And what do you think of the takeover of the police department, state takeover?
I'm completely opposed to the state takeover of SLMPD. They should be accountable to us, the people of St. Louis, the people who pay their salaries, full stop, period. And I don't think the police budget should continue to expand. And the dollar amount isn't, at one point it was for every dollar the police get, Health and Human Services gets 1 cent. That's what it was. That's the ratio up until fiscal year 2023. Since 23, that 1 cent doesn't even exist anymore, and the police budget continues to expand. So I do not support expanding the police budget. What I do support is us peeling money away from the police department and investing that money in the things that actually create public safety, like safe, affordable housing. Let's fully fund and expand our violence prevention programs. Let's make our universal basic income pilot permanent. Let's expand it to include unhoused people and at-risk queer people, specifically trans folks, because these are the things that actually create public safety for our community. Based on our police budget, we spend $256 million a year arresting, incarcerating, and prosecuting people. We spend $0 on services for the unhoused. We spent $150K for youth services in the last fiscal year. We spent less than $100,000 on violence prevention programs. We have a newly invented Office of Violence Prevention that needs more funding that would go a lot further to creating safety in our communities than having police does. Based on our police budget and the number of police officers that we have, we should be the safest city in the country, but we are not, because policing as it is currently constructed does not work. It does not create public safety. We can do better in the ways that we reallocate our funding.
Is this working? Yeah. Okay, great. So it's been a long night. Just want to make sure the battery pack is working. There's the green light. Okay. So first of all, local control of our police department. My very first campaign, Janie Archie, Cap Carr, and Terry, we met regularly and talked about local control. I have always been an advocate for local control of our police department. I continue to be an advocate for local control of our police department. I worked with the Slay administration to get local control of our police department. And I just, with my colleagues, helped to pass a resolution to send to the governor to make sure that our voices are heard about local control of our police department. I firmly believe that when local taxpayer dollars are at stake, the local representation should have the voice at the table in terms of how those funds are spent. So I'll get that on the record from the get. In terms of housing and human services and other programs, we actually do spend money on the unhoused. The city of St. Louis has a budget, I believe this past fiscal year, of about $40 million that we've put into unhoused programs. Now, we can do better. I freely admit that. And I try to make sure that those voices are at the table as well, and that we're making sure that we're providing housing, not just transitional housing, but emergency housing when
be able to support people, to be able to support here in the city of St. Louis. And I am I am a woman who transgresses many identities, many of which you are not able to even see on me. But the leader that I am is that we prioritize people. We prioritize keeping each other safe. And so I'm willing to do whatever it takes, whatever is necessary, whatever gaps we have, whatever attacks may be coming down from the federal administration, from the state administration. I look forward to being able to be a human being that is able to recognize the humanity in all of us, no matter where you fall in the political spectrum, no matter where you fall in your identity, no matter who you are, you deserve to be protected. You deserve a representative who sees that in you and is willing to go to the bat every time to make sure that your rights are protected.
Institutions in the state and country are directly attacking queer and trans people, immigrants, and more. What knowledge and new perspective will you add to the BOA to combat institutional harm?
Yeah, and what that means is I don't believe these surveillance jails are the answer to the problem. It's to immigrants, folks, and birthing people who the state and the federal government is always trying to attack. My perspective is different from my two opponents. I am always looking for innovative, creative ways to solve our problems that don't involve getting police or surveillance involved. Can you repeat the second part of the question for me?
Yeah. What knowledge and new perspective will you add to the BOA to combat institutional harm?
We've never had an abolitionist at the Board of Aldermen. We've never had someone with my perspective, someone who sees the answers to these problems outside of the prison industrial complex, outside of the criminal legal system. And because we've never had that at the Board of Aldermen, it's why we keep getting policies that are leaning on police, that are leaning on surveillance, that are leaning on criminalization. My first instinct when it comes to these problems is to think, how do we get to the root cause of these problems, and how do we protect our most vulnerable citizens? How do we protect our most vulnerable communities? It's one of the reasons why I worked so incredibly hard to help write and pass the CCOPS legislation that passed late last summer, that reduced the amount of surveillance that the police have access to without communities' input, because I know that the state and the federal level are going to lean on policing. They're going to lean on a partnership with ICE. They're going to lean on surveillance in order to target these. I'll continue to fight against that.
A similar question was posed at the forum that we had on Super Bowl Sunday. I want to, one, acknowledge, as an openly LGBTQ candidate, these issues have been near and dear to my heart. And while it's not a new perspective down at the board, I was the first openly LGBTQ person elected to the board. I have had to deal with the homophobia, not only at City Hall, but in our community as well, as a leader within the LGBTQ community. I advocate tirelessly for that community and for the refugees and immigrants that call the Third Ward home. When we have these issues, the last Trump presidency, and as soon as he got sworn into office, I was picking up the phone and having conversations with the police department, with the mayor's office. What can we do to ensure the safety of our refugee and immigrant community? What policies can we implement with the police department so that they're not coordinating with ICE and other institutions that cause harm within our communities? I passed the city's first non-discrimination ordinance that protects our trans community. And since I passed that, I've been trying to work to get more funding for CREA, which is a civil rights enforcement agency that does not have adequate staffing to enforce discrimination in housing and employment situations. And we need to be able to do better with respect to that. It's very evident that we need to make sure that we're protecting the community. The city of St. Paul every day.
Okay. All right. Well, that is all that we're going to do for the choir. Everyone's going to get to have their closing comments. Adams, you. Yes.
3 minutes. Okay. Well, I'm not sure if I need all three, but I will do my best. I appreciate every single person that was here in attendance tonight. I do want to thank Dutchtown South Community Corporation, the Mount Pleasant Neighborhood Association, and all of you for being here in attendance. You know, I think it's very exciting, the opportunity that we have before us in the third ward for the first time since 2009 to be able to choose from a variety of candidates who are well qualified and are standing on their own principles and morals and beliefs in what this ward can be. And so I will close by just reiterating, I am a community member. I'm not an elected official. I'm a mother, I'm a communicator, and I am a community leader. I believe deeply in the promises not only of our community, but the entire city of St. Louis. And I think that it is time for us to be able to have visionary, pragmatic, and when I say pragmatic, because I've heard the critiques of what that word brings up, realistic, actionable steps to grow our city and to move us forward. A lot of the things that we are dealing with, that we are grappling with, are basic issues that should not be large gaps. And the reason why they are such large gaps is because we are continuing to recycle and reiterate the same ideas. We are continuing to recycle and reiterate the same trains of thought, the same knowledge. We are prioritizing the same voices over and over and over again. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We need people who are not embedded and who are not beholden to stakeholders, who are not beholden to lobbyists, who are not beholden to ideas that prioritize their own priorities and their own special interests over the interests of the entirety of the third ward. There are 20,000 people who exist in the third ward. And tonight we have the pleasure of speaking to about 40 people in this room. This is such a small subset, and for far too long, people in the third ward have become disengaged and disinvested. Nobody listens to me, nobody solves my problems, and there's no reason for me to participate in our city's government. There's no reason for me to stay in this area. I'm selling my house, I'm moving my rental property, I'm going somewhere else because the city of St. Louis is not a place for someone like me. Someone who wants to be able to stay in place in their safe community, someone who wants to be able to own a home and not be upside down in their mortgage should they choose to sell, someone who believes of community and is working diligently to make those bridges to their neighbors, regardless of who they may be. And so I am running, and I ask for your support on March 4th to be able to bring a new lens to our leadership, not only here in the third ward, but in the entire city of St. Louis. It is time for us to reclaim our spot as a world-class city, and we cannot do that if we are going to continue to reiterate the same things that we know are not working for us right now. Thank you for your time tonight.
My name is Inez Bordeaux, and I'm asking for your vote on March 4th because we need new leadership in the third ward. We need a fresh perspective. So I'm going to take a moment to just tell you about some of the work I've done and some of the work I've led. I led the campaign to close a hellhole jail here in St. Louis, the workhouse. I stopped the mayor's plan to move our unhoused to a toxic piece of land that the workhouse sits on in a toxic facility in the middle of nowhere where there are no bus lines or sidewalks or grocery stores. I've led for the last 2 years the People's Plan St. Louis, which is a coalition of 50 plus St. Louis organizations who do work everything from tenant and renters' rights to reproductive justice to pilot campaigns to reform our TIF and tax abatement process. I led the process to re-envision what the workhouse could become. Every single piece, almost every single piece of progressive legislation that is passed in the city of St. Louis has my fingerprints on it. I either led the work to get that legislation passed, to get people to show up to testify in support of, or if it's bad legislation or bad policy, I led the organizing that led to some of that terrible legislation going down. I have always been about the people of St. Louis. I love St. Louis. This is my city. I live here. I'm raising my kids here. Out of all of the work that I've done, that's touched every aspect of many of our lives, things that you may not even realize. If I've been able to do that on a citywide level, I want you to imagine what I can do when I narrow my focus down to the 21,000 people who live in the third ward. I have a resume. I have a strong track record. I am on the record. There are hundreds of hours of tape of me at the Board of Aldermen advocating on behalf of the third ward as the committee woman and advocating for the things that our community actually needs, the things that actually create real public safety, services for the unhoused, safe, affordable housing, childcare, drug treatment, substance abuse, disorder treatment. I have been in the streets and I will continue to be in the streets for the people of St. Louis. And with your vote on March 4th, I will be your representative at the Board of Aldermen fighting for you the same way I've been fighting for the people of the city. And not only would it be my honor, it would be my pleasure to be able to represent you and fight for you going forward.
I would also like to just reiterate my thanks to Dutchtown South and to St. Anthony's Parish for allowing us the opportunity to use the hall and to be here together tonight to talk about these issues that are very important to the neighbors of the third ward. I also want to thank all of you for being here tonight and taking time out of your very busy schedules to be here with us three. I'd like to thank my opponents for their time this evening as well and providing perspectives that we all can talk about. It's really important for us to do that. As the incumbent, I am here because I want to learn, I want to listen, I want to grow, and I want to share the work and experience that I've brought to the table year after year here for the third ward and for you all to benefit from. I helped to create the St. Joseph's Housing Initiative. I built the first community garden, designed and built, paid with ward capital, the first community garden in the third ward. I have been there on the forefront of progressive issues. While one of my opponents talks about having her fingerprint on them, my name is on those bills. My votes are tied to those bills. And you have to have nuance down at the Board of Aldermen to be able to get the votes to make those pieces of legislation pass. I have the history and the track record of doing that. It is not easy work. People have talked about my responsiveness. My phone number is on every bathroom wall between Holly Hills and Chippewa. I literally get phone calls, text messages, Facebook messages, Twitter messages every single day from neighbors. I was with neighbors last night at a neighborhood meeting that's just in its second month of formation, something that has taken us a year to get to that point. I was with neighbors on Monday with another group of neighbors that's working to start a neighborhood association. I am doing the work to help organize our community, to help build our community, make it a more inclusive and more accessible place for everyone to live, not just some people, all people. I have been doing the work here, bringing affordable housing options to the third ward, bringing in community partners that are doing the work, providing youth services. Jean Slay Boys and Girls Club didn't beg to come into the third ward. I literally had to sow the seeds, working with Matthew Dickey's Boys and Girls Club, working with Herbert Hoover Boys and Girls Club, working with Jean Slay Boys and Girls Club to get them access to resources to open up facilities in our community. That doesn't take an overnight action. It doesn't take talk. It takes a lot of time and effort. I have also been on the forefront of getting a new healthcare facility at Grand and Chippewa. That only happened because of a $14 million appropriation through the ARPA funds to get family healthcare centers to open up a new healthcare facility for low and moderate income individuals and families that will be a benefit to our ward. That did not happen overnight. I started those conversations 10 years ago. I have been working for the people every single day. I appreciate the constructive conversation. I appreciate the critiques, and I will continue to grow as a leader, as a neighbor, as a friend. Some people walk, some people talk. I walk the talk, and I am happy to be your representative at City Hall. And if so humbly, I ask for your favorable vote on March 4th at the polls. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Well, that wraps up our third ward Aldermanic forum. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our candidates and everyone for being here. This was delightful.
I mean,
It all happens. One, you were on film.
you were my treasurer.
And then you come in here.
The question was,
Yeah.
when she were like,
the stream.
what's that?
Oh,
Yeah.
She didn't do the
Let's talk about it.
Hi everyone that might be watching. Here I have.
Hi, yeah, I'm Maxie. How's it
I
going?
wrote this just so we get clear audio.
Can you
So
see
tell
me?
What did you? There we go. I see you now. What did you think about tonight's forum?
Hi. Yeah, I thought it was an interesting debate. I really like seeing all the candidates come out and talk. Having gone to other debates, I can see a lot of people, they have their consistent messaging, but then there was a lot of inconsistencies, right? In the last debate, when they were asked if they would allow police and ICE to work together, candidate Dallas Adams said, we need to give more money to police. We need to have more police. Wasn't really paying attention to the question and answered that way. And tonight she lied and said that she never did that. So this inconsistency of how people are shifting contingent on audiences is really interesting. I'm wondering how it'll shape up with the rest of the election.
So, who do you think? 4 hours.
Yeah, I think that they all have different things. I think Shane and Inez kind of had the most plans. They have the most concrete ideas. I think Dallas, as a comms person, has a lot of niceties and really can smooth out the way that she talks to people. But there isn't really substantive policy behind it. In policy that is being represented by her kind of changes. So tonight, I do think that Shane really surprised me with the way he was answering questions. He really had a plan, the way he stood up, got out of the chair and said, I'm going to communicate with you like your people, getting closer to you. I think that was really good and worked on his behalf.
And the last question I have for you is, what advice do you have to the voters who might be on the fence?
Yeah, I think that this election and all elections, really, there are a lot of candidates who are looking to paint a picture. They're laundering their ethics and their morals with niceties. And I think that we really should understand who do they really represent, and not just what they say, but kind of behavioral patterns to see how they have shown up in the past and how they'll continue to show up. And I think in this election, really just look at who has been here. Dallas lived here, moved here during the pandemic. She hasn't been here during Ferguson, during Stockley. She hasn't seen us even before the pandemic. So if you don't know where we're coming from, how do you know where we're going to go? And I think right now it's a choice between, do you want moderatism? Do you want to go all the way to the left? Or do you kind of want to stay with the same old? And that's what we got.
Wow, that's fantastic insight. And that basically concludes our live stream. I thank you so much for being our resident perspective to the table. And thank you for being a part of Encore STL live stream broadcast of our forum tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I can't believe I went.
Where it's being streamed.
Yeah, go to YouTube.
Okay.
And then /@ Encore STL.
Encore or EN Encore STL.
Yep, but it should lead your stream.
Okay. Thank you so much.
I have checked the speck of dust from all of its side. Fall down, that from my height. Cause I didn't see the plank I have in my eye.